Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Module, and today I'm going to be breaking down this track of mine called Classical, which is forthcoming on Sleepless Records. Classical is a very, very interesting tune. It's something that I've never really made before in this kind of style. It's got some very unique sound design and an absolutely massive, complicated project to go with it. I'm just going to show you from here how the tune sounds, because if you're watching this you probably may not have heard it yet. You might have done, but you probably haven't. So I'm going to go from 17 bars, just ignoring the intro purely because I don't particularly just want to sit here and watch the screen whilst it goes along. But yeah, I'll go from here.
Classical piece of music. Classical piece of music.
But yeah, that's the kind of first 32 bars from there, at least, I think. Yeah, let's jump into it, because we've got the actual project file here. Not here. Here. There we go. So I painstakingly spent about 2 hours the other day organising the entire project, just so that you can see what's gone into it exactly. And as you can see, there's a lot. I've had to convert some stuff to audio because my CPU just could not handle this project at all, especially with OBS on and recording. But yeah, so I'm going to start with each section from the top, so the drums. Now I need to make sure my limiters are turned off on the other buses, because again my CPU just can't handle it, but that the limiter on the drum bus is on, and then I'll kind of turn them on and off for each bus as I go through. But yeah, the drums, let's have a listen to them on their own. Pretty simple, not too many layers going to them at all. But this kick is one of mine, as you can see, processed Mills, back when I used to be called Mills. It was one of my own ones that I made in Phase Plant. Pretty simple kick. I think there was some reverb automation on that, but just ignore that. A snare, again another one that I've made in Phase Plant. Just ignore the reverb. Yeah, I don't know why the reverb still chooses to be on. It's because there's some automation somewhere down the line on the reverb. But yeah, so these two drum hits are the main sort of hits that carry the weight and the body of the tune, of the drums at least. They've got all the low end, or this kick does. But it's layered with this little break layer, which is a sample from Molecular's pack that I bought. If I show you how it sounds on its own. Nice little drum loop. But because I wanted to keep these two as the main kind of drums, what I did was I EQ'd out a lot of this and turned it really low down. Just so that it wouldn't interfere, and obviously I've done a bit of chopping on the break as well, so that it doesn't have all of the little bits in between, like in there, because I just didn't want them, So from that to that, and yeah, layered up with that just makes quite a nice sounding full drum break. But we can't forget the percussion, and I think the percussion in this tune is really, I don't know what the word is, but it really just adds to it. So again, these are my own samples. I made these hi-hats in Serum quite a while back. As you can see, again, they're called Mills, back when I was Mills. But yeah, it's just a closed hat on every 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. Except for this open hat, which was really interesting. I took the open hat on its own, and then duplicated it and reversed it and put it next to it, so it creates that like sucking in almost, like, rather than just. And I hear that effect used a lot in the type of tunes you'd hear on Sofa Sound and From Molecular and DLR and stuff like that, and I wanted to try and replicate that, and it took me a while to figure it out. But yeah, you just take the open hat that you've got, reverse it and place it next to it, and so, you know, when they're all together you get a nice little hi-hat groove. And I don't know if you can see, but these hi-hats are not exactly on the grid, and this does two things. One, it adds extra groove to the tune because not everything is so robotic and hitting on the same spot, which you just wouldn't have with a real drummer. And two, it preserves the transients, so you know that the transient of this hi-hat is not getting in the way of the transient of that kick, because there's just that little audio gap there on the hat, if that makes sense. And yeah, each hat is slightly different as well, slightly different tone and volume on them. So again, it just adds more groove to it. But yeah, they're the kind of the basics of the drums on their own. I don't think there's too much variation on them. Although actually here, I brought back the full sort of loop and added more of these hi-hats. Because when the tune progresses, it goes from, you know, this straight 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm into something a bit quicker. And you can see there at the end of each bar or 4 bars, whatever it is, I don't really know my music terminology that well, but yeah, at the end of each whatever, the hats just change up a little bit. Again, it just adds an element of call and response between the drums. And yeah, this is just a kick build by the producer pack from Bass Tripper. It's very simple, it's just a kick build up. I couldn't be bothered to make one myself, and for some reason that one just worked with the tune. But I've also got this little this part, which I can't remember how I made that, because this is all one sequence. Yeah, I can't remember how I made that little end bit. It might be that it was like in its own project one time and I made all the hi-hats, and then maybe I stuck that on at the end as a sample, because it doesn't sound like I don't think I synthesized that bit. But yeah, what else for the drums? This little drum fill is quite cool. Again, it's a Bass Tripper sample. I'm awful at making these fills. And again, that just adds a little, almost like a turnaround at the end of the 8 bars on this one. And then the response to that is then the little shaky percussion bit at the end. And yeah, that just creates a nice little call and response between the two. Not really much else to the drums other than that. They're quite simple in terms of arrangement. There's little variations throughout the tunes on the positioning of the kick drum. Like for example here, I've taken out some things and put some more things in other spaces. It's just about creating a sort of variation across the drums so they don't end up as boring, or the same thing the whole way through. The build-up is pretty simple. just sort of ramping up in intensity. So that's the drums on the first drop at least. The second drop, they're very similar, basically the same, just I took out one kick, I think. Yeah, just a slight pattern change up, just to keep it interesting across the drops. In terms of processing, I don't really want to talk too much about processing on here. One, because it will take forever, and two, because there's so much. There's quite a lot going on with these drums, but I will say one thing that's important is parallel compression. So at the end of my massive chain, I've got everything going to another bus right at the end, just to be awkward, which is being distorted like crazy. Should be able to hear it. You can't really hear it because it's blended in, but if I was to turn this all the way up, completely distorted beyond belief. But that's a good thing. That's what parallel compression's for. You basically send your drum bus to another signal, compress and distort the hell out of it, EQ it just so you're not adding any extra mess to your drums, and then it just kind of fills them out. Like, so this is with the parallel compression. You might not even notice too much of a difference, but this is with, and then without. It's not a major difference, but it's enough to be noticeable. You don't always need parallel compression. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I just thought the drums needed a bit of extra beef on this track, and parallel compression is a good way of doing that. So that's the drums covered. Not really too much to talk about there. Let's move on to the basses. Now this is where it gets fun. The basses in this track are so complicated. Like, the amount of automation going on is a joke. But I'll try to explain it the best I can. I probably won't go too deep into the sound design kind of things, more just arrangement, because I could talk for hours about it. But yeah, let's play the basses on their own. So there's about 3 or 4 different bass sounds in there. This is the first one. Bloody reverb, where is it? I'm just going to turn that reverb off. There you go. This is from, and I spoke about this in a couple of videos on my own channel. If you haven't seen them, go look at that. But it's basically, I did a massive long recording of just messing around on a synth, and you just chop out little sections of it that work, and this little bit worked quite nicely as a sort of, as that initial hit, that initial call. So that's your call, and then this bass is the response to that call. So call, response. And there's not really much to talk about with this bass. I can't show you how I made it because I don't even know. I was just messing around on synth, recording it. But I'll talk about this one. It's a very interesting sound. Lots of automation going on to make it sound the way it does. As you can see, the pitch bend does quite a lot. So on the up range of the pitch bend, it can go up an octave, but on the down it can only go down 2 semitones, and that kind of lets you get, as you see here where it goes a bit higher, it lets you get those sort of higher up tones and frequencies without bending it down too much, because if that range down was all the way at 12, then it would bend down almost an octave, which would go down really low and would sound stupid. You see what I mean? Get that too. That pitch bend is quite important. Without it, it's just very static, sort of I mean, how boring is that? That's so much better. Yeah, like I say, I don't really want to go too much into the sound design because it's a bit. I don't even know what I'm doing with it most of the time. But it's a fairly simple patch, I guess. It's just a sine wave being FM'd by this wavetable, which is 3 octaves and 4 semitones up from that one, with a sub-octave below it. A bit of white noise. And this LFO, which is on quite a few things. It's on the levels of all oscillators and is on this frequency of this EQ, which I used rather than a filter, because I'm using this on the filter. Now again, if you've watched my videos before, you'll know I like to use the phase 48 plus filter a lot because it just brings out different tones in your basses, so without it. Still good, but it's a very subtle difference. It just adds a little extra crunch to it, you know. But yeah, it's quite a bassy sound. I'd normally consider using a separate sub for a sound like this because it's quite messy and stuff, but I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't feel like it. I just left it as I think there's. You can't hear any bass there because, yeah, that bloody automation. There you go. Yeah, the bass is it's quite tight within the patch, really. I think that big low boost on the compressor there is helping that. But yeah, this LFO, like I said, it's on the rate of everything. But I don't know why I said but yeah, it's being the rate of that LFO is being modulated by this macro, and so this macro, as you see it comes up here, it just speeds that LFO up a little bit, which again just adds another level of movement to it. Because again, without it, it just sounds quite static. Which isn't what you want, especially if you take away the pitch bend, it's even more static. So you have to really consider these things when you're making basses, like what can you do to bring them to life a little bit. Which leads me on to these macros as well, which I believe are linked to the sync. Well, this one, macro 2, this one is on the FM, and that only comes up towards the end of the sound. It just gives that last little bit of it a little extra tone, same as macro 3, which is doing the exact same thing but on the sync. Macro 4, interesting, that's on the wavetable position and the level of oscillator B. Now, I highly debated whether it needed to be on the level in this tune. I really didn't know whether to use it or not, but I decided to keep it in the end, and you'll just about hear why. So like I said, it's on macro 4, so just watch when macro 4 comes up. Obviously that's bringing the level up. If I turn that off and then turn it on, still sounds perfectly okay, but bringing in the level of that second oscillator ever so slightly with macro 4, like it's not coming in a lot, just a little bit, that just about brings in like an extra tone to it as it sort of comes up. I don't really know how to describe it, it just felt right, you know. But yeah, that's on the wavetable position and the level, and it just brings another sound, another level of movement to the sound. Like I say, if I turn all these automations off, it's a really boring sound. Really boring, but then you stick them on and it's like, wow, okay, you've got something that really has a character and it really talks and moves. And I took these automations quite far throughout the track, and I really pushed how far I could sort of go with them, especially in the second drop, which I'll show you now actually. They're here. just think they sound so cool. And I'll turn that reverb back on for this bit actually, because it plays quite an important part in the second drop. I left quite big sort of reverb gaps by automating the mix of the reverb up. As you can see here, Valhalla Shimmer mix. It just comes up all the time and it just fills out some empty spaces. That little bit, I don't know what it is, but it's probably my favourite part of the entire tune, this little... Because you've got that FM coming up at the end as well, that high-pitched FM sort of squeakiness is what gets sent into the reverb as it gets brought up, and so the reverb is then really like high-pitched and sort of... I don't know, I just really like that sound. If I turn it off, it's just not the same, is it? But yeah, that's the FM and the sync being increased by those macros that's changing that. I just wanted to talk about variation as well, actually, back to the first bass. Like I said, it is just a big audio clip recording, and so with that you have the freedom to chop out any bits that you like, place them where you like, and that can really give you some unique sounds. Especially here as well. This is just a longer part of it. Yeah, so there's not really much point in explaining what each and every one of the shapes does. You can visually see, okay, this one, affecting the LFO rate, this one affecting the pitch bend, this one affecting the FM. When you learn to kind of visualize it like that, I think it's just a skill that takes time, I think, because most of the time I don't go in with an intention of wanting to draw a specific shape on an automation. I just kind of mess around with little points and just find little bits that work and sound cool. And another automation on that same bass is, you can see here where my mouse is, there's a slight drop in the octave of oscillator B, so the one that's FM into oscillator A. I've just dropped that octave down by 1, so that when it gets to this second section of bass, the bass sound is slightly deeper and a bit, not as high pitched, because it doesn't have that oscillator B is now an octave lower. And again, the rates and the pitch bend, I think that is, it doesn't say pitch bend on it, but it's the pitch bend. And another note as well, I added another little note in so that it, even with the pitch bend, it just sounds really cool. That's all there is really to that sound. I've kind of shown you how I've made it, shown you the automations, which, if you're going to take anything away from today, take away the fact that these automations are essential to bringing your bass, and not only your bass but your tunes, to life. Because if it was just this one static sound the whole way through, I mean, I'd be bored of listening by there, let alone, never mind, like a whole another 2 or 3 minutes of it. So yeah, just mess around with automations, see what sounds you can come up with, really push the shapes and just trying out different things of what might sound cool. So the next sound, I think you can still hear the parallel compression on the drums in there, so I'm just turn that off. I don't really know how this sound was made. Might be one of my own presets. Oh no, it wasn't. I just made this sound from scratch for the day, I guess. All sorts of stuff going on. She had one oscillator turned up and the second oscillator turned all the way down, and it's 4 octaves below that oscillator. However, because it's using this harmonic series wavetable, and I'm in the like eighth harmonic of it or something, it doesn't matter that it's 3 octaves down, because that's such a like high pitched harmonic. Whereas if it was down here, sounds pretty cool. It might work in another tune actually. But yeah, you know, might work on other ones. I don't know, 8 just seemed to work best. Just use your ears. And yeah, this shape is controlling that. The rate of this LFO, which is on the FM, the cutoff of the filter, the gain on this notch, on this EQ, for some reason. I guess I just needed to take out that little... Oh, I've got the shivers there. Yeah. Yeah, I think it just kind of cleans it up a little bit. And it's on the reverb for some reason. I wouldn't normally use Theorem's reverb, if I'm being honest. I don't like the way it sounds, so don't know why I've done that. I think it just kind of opens up a bit more brightness with the filter there, or with the LFO, sorry. And I don't know what this second LFO is doing. LFO 2. It's on the master tune. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is just a bit of vibrato, if you like. So yeah, LFO 2 is on the master tune, and the auxiliary source is macro 1. So that won't affect the master tune unless macro 1 gets brought up, which it is. And so without that, it just adds like a bit of wobbliness to it. So without it, very subtle, but you could take it a lot further than how subtle I've taken it if you wanted to go really wobbly. Didn't seem to make too much difference there. Like I say, I've got it very low down on the mix of how much it's affecting the master tune. Not a lot. But yeah, a little bit of pitch bend on there. A little bit of LFO rate movement, just to kind of, because again, without them it's a bit static. Kind of cool, but not the sound I wanted. I wanted a bit more like wham wham rather than wham. But that bass is the one that I used in the build-up, but I've used a longer version of it, modulating the LFO rate a bit more. Yeah, I just think that worked quite nicely in the intro there. But yeah, I'm gonna move on to the next bass in a second. Yeah, the fourth bass is in there somewhere. I think it's 4 basses. I got 4. I've only got 1, 2. Oh no, there is 4. Yeah, never mind. The fourth bass doesn't really come in very often. It's just at the end of every sort of. It's literally only in the tune 1, 2. It's in the tune twice, this sound, or 4 times if you're including the intro. But yeah, it's literally just at the end here. It kind of finishes the end sequence quite nicely. That little bow wow 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 before it switches into the next bit. I don't know, it's just cool. But yeah, there's not too much going on in this sound, I don't think. How many Reese's can one man make? That was the name of the patch, because it doesn't want to play. But yeah, this patch was initially a Reese bass from my own basses. There you go. How many Reese's can one man make? And I just changed it so that it doesn't sound like a Reese, basically. Sounds pretty cool, actually. Yeah, I've obviously changed around with the harmonics quite a lot because it's definitely not a Reese bass anymore. it's this really weird, complicated wavetable on there, which I think is in Growl folder, maybe? FM? Yeah, there you go, it's in the FM folder, Metal Fish 1. And that's got an LFO on it. On the wavetable position, the filter cut off, and on the cut off of this second filter, which is a reverb filter, which no, doesn't add reverb, it's just called a reverb filter. It just adds extra tone to it. Just kind of grits it up a little bit, you know. Chorus on there for some reason, don't ask why, I guess it just needed it. Maybe it needed a bit of width to it. And this sub, which is an octave higher than the this one. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And the only automation on it is this pitch bend, which is again an octave up. If it was to take every single automation off of every single bass, like the entire track would just not even be listenable. It would be that bad. It's just really shows you the importance of making these little edits to the character. So yeah, you can see how important they are to the overall sound of the tune, or the overall vibe at least. Processing, I've done my classic ring mod trick, which just adds a bit of white noise to everything. I spoke about this in one of the videos on my own channel. Go check that if you're interested. And yeah, just tons of distortion, compression, clipping, limiting, the standard kind of stuff you'd expect to see on a bus. But yeah, that's the bases. Let's move on to the atmospheres and stuff. Now, I know I didn't show, when I showed you a clip of the tune, I didn't actually show you the intros and stuff, because I didn't want to just sit there for ages, but I'll show you it now. Yeah. And this would have some hi-hats over it, but they're turned off. So it's pretty simple actually. This sound I made from one of the basses. I think it was that big main long bass. I think I just slapped a shit ton of reverb and delay and like tremolator and stuff on it and pitched it up an octave, and just eventually found a little bit that worked as a loop, but the sound on its own is yeah, it's a freaky little sound. But that's a great way to, if you're struggling to find sounds for an intro, especially sounds that are cohesive with the rest of your track, just grab your bass, stick a bunch of reverb and stuff on it and record it, and you're almost guaranteed to find something that works with your tune. But yeah, that just kind of loops. The next sound is this one. Which is a preset from Citrus. If you use FL, Citrus is on there. I don't think you can get it in other DAWs with DAWs, but the preset is Choir 2. It's in this massive folder of Citrus presets. But yeah, I did have to render that to audio because my PC couldn't handle all of these synths and stuff open. Even though there's not even that many synths in this tune, it's just a lot of processing, I think, which it didn't like. But yeah, that, you know, layered with that. Sounds quite mean. This next one, I cheated. It's literally just an Annex pad sample I haven't really done much to it, to be honest, but it's such a cool sample that I just had to stick it in there. And yeah, it crossfades into the next one because I couldn't really figure out how to get it to transition smoothly. And yeah, that's just layered up with, again, another Annex sample, which is just a riser, pretty standard riser. Not much explanation needed there. But one thing I really, really wanted to talk about with this track is what I've done to the intro and the second drop. Now, it sounds completely different, so I will go from here. And before I say what it is that makes it sound different, I want people to try and guess, see if they can figure it out for themselves. Comes in about here is when I think it starts sounding different. Here.
It would take a person who is aesthetic to appreciate that classical piece of music.
So yeah, any guesses on how that's done before I tell you? Leave it in the comments. But it's a frequency shifter on the bus of the synth, on the synth bus. So it's affecting every single sound that's going to that synth bus. What's the frequency shifter doing? That's another question. I don't know. There's 2 frequency shifters on there, as a matter of fact. So let's watch. The frequency of this one comes up and then down.
It would take a person who
Up
is
again.
aesthetic to appreciate.
And then all the way up. This one is in ring mod mode. So the 2 are working at the same time in opposite directions. Yeah, I won't lie, that was just kind of by complete mistake. I didn't really mean to make it sound like that, but it sounded so cool that I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to keep that. It creates a really, really nice variation from the first drop, and it proper leads you into the second drop, which, like I said earlier, is my favourite part of the tune, the way it just kind of glues together. But yeah, that's a frequency shifter doing that. If we look at the automation clips for each one, get that out of the way. I've broken it now. Yeah, so the mix of that first frequency shifter comes up as the frequency comes up and down, and the other I don't know, man, it's too confusing to even try to explain. That's why I thought it would just be easier to show you them side by side so you can sort of see what they're doing to the sound. So it's the mix of this one that's coming in. Pretty cool. And yeah, there's some other sort of general automations on there as well. So the frequency, I've got this automation clip is attached to an EQ, which is just rolling off the low end as it gets higher and higher. So you can sort of hear it. little filter sweep type thing. And I've got the same going on the drums as well, so the drums filter up as the synths and everything go up. I didn't actually put any reverbed basses or anything in this second build-up / intro, unlike in the first one here. I just left them kind of empty. I wanted to show off the frequency shifter movement, if you like. But yeah, the last thing really is the vocal, which is pretty self-explanatory.
It would take a person who is aesthetic to appreciate that classical piece of music.
I don't really think there's too many effects going on the vocal.
It would take a person who is aesthetic. It would take a person who is aesthetic.
There's a bit of like echo and reverb on there, but I think I've got that turned off for this second drop. I'm sure the first part had more on it, maybe.
It would take a person who is...
Oh no, I remember now. I didn't want too much echo and reverb and stuff on the vocal during the build-up, because it kind of muddied it up a bit, especially with all of the reverb sounds going on already. It was like a washed out mess. But I did use a bit of echo here before it transitioned into the next part of the tune.
Classical piece of music.
Which just seems to have cut off there.
Classical piece of music.
Fair enough. I guess I just didn't need the echo on there. But yeah, there's not really much else to the tune other than what I've shown you. It's just sort of stacking up a lot of different sounds for the intro. 3 or 4 different sounds. I didn't want too complicated of an intro, nothing too like melodic or catchy. I just wanted it to be a bit dark and sort of almost plain, but in a good way. But yeah, I think I've shown you everything there is to show you now, really. Yeah. I'll see if it lets me play everything at once with all the limiters turned on without my CPU crashing. Probably won't. It'll go all clicky. Seems to be holding out for today. But yeah, so I guess the 3 main takeaways from this are: experiment with the placement of your percussion to help with groove of the track. Experiment with all sorts of different automations. Don't make your basses sound boring like this does. Jesus, could go to sleep to that. And third point, experiment with a frequency shifter on the whole bus for that sound. So if you've got a synth bus, stick one on the synth bus, have a play around with it and see if you can make some cool effects. I think this audio clip, the fact that I've converted it to audio, is actually quite cool. I think it really shows you what it's doing to the sound. And actually, one last thing that I'll show you. Right at the end of the track, I did the same thing with some automation, so it has like a really nice intro or outro.
It would take a person who is aesthetic to appreciate that classical piece of music.
And yeah, that's all there is to it. If there's anything that anyone's got any questions about or was unsure of, because I know my explanations aren't always the best, or if there's just any advice anyone needs, don't be afraid to leave a comment on the video or just drop me a message on Instagram or TikTok at module.dnb. And yeah, I look forward to getting this tune out there and everyone being able to listen to it and experiencing what I would call a classical piece of music. Alright, see you in the next one.